And as we continue to observe the European Parliament election, we've talked a lot about politics, but a lot of times we do forget that European Union is first and foremost a trade union. And of course, the election results will have an effect on economic policies, and who better to talk about it than an economist. So with that, we are bringing in our guest.
Indeed, and joining us to discuss this is Raffaella Tenconi. And now, hello, madam, and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
So now, the EU has been going from one crisis to another. I feel like it is safe to say. So the economic crises, we witnessed the Brexit, the pandemic, the slow economic growth, and now the war on its borders. So if you add the extremely tough geopolitical context of US and China rivalry, so what is the future of Europe? I know it's a grand question, but we do have to ask it.
Well, as you said, there were many extremely difficult shocks in the last few years, and the Union, I would say, successfully navigated it in the sense that, yes, COVID recession was very deep, but overall the economic union, overall continued to expand. Living standards in most countries are still rising. And there is a process and a plan on how to address the climate change and how to boost defense spending in order to address whatever it is, the evolution of the Russia-Ukraine war. So I would say, of course, the challenges are very severe. And this election result is showing that the implementation of a lot of these ideas and legislation that have put in place is still very difficult and it needs to be perfected. But overall, the European project, I would say it's still successful. The vast majority of the European parliamentary seats are made of people that believe in the European project and are keen to take it forward. Just to reiterate, the coalition that was outgoing, that most likely be continued, has 403 seats out of 720. So that's a comfortable majority.
Right, and one of the major talking points about the coming European Union project is the competitiveness, of course, talking about economically. And with that in mind, we do know that, of course, they're referring to the competition between US and China. And unfortunately, we do see a stance that's not very unified within the European Union. Do you think that there will be a more kind of consolidated stance going forward, or will these European countries still pursue their own individual economic policy towards China?
I mean, when you talk about competitiveness, there are many aspects. I think, first of all, not to be forgotten, the European Recovery Fund still has 2.5 years to go, and it's still unfolding, and it will accentuate because of the monetary easing of the ECB. So this is a big bulk of the competitiveness that you will see improving in the next few years. The second leg is energy policy. And I would say that with this result, probably you will see some tweaks that will go and improve the competitiveness outlook. In terms of electrification, you'll most likely also see more active role of nuclear energy, which will reduce the costs. So I think this is a second element of improvement. On the question of China, yes, the position of the member states are not unified. But there is a legal framework that will go and increase the level playing field between Chinese goods and European goods, because the tariff barriers on Chinese products on margin is probably going to rise. So I would say it's not unity, but it's a workable agreement in shape. And the third element, of course, is the evolution of the expansion of the European Union. As you know, Ukraine, Georgia, and other member states are candidate countries, and the difficulty will be managing that process, and that will be up for the next parliament to decide the timeline.
And now, zooming out ever so slightly and looking at this from a wider view, what role, to your mind, do economic issues play in this election compared to, for instance, cultural or identity issues?
Well, I mean, I am an economist, so I tend to draw a great deal of indicators and try to trace their economic reasons. So from my perspective, for example, the fact that France and Germany had fairly strong electoral results against the ruling coalition has an important economic aspect to it. I want to give you one statistics that, in my view, really well captures why in Germany AfD is so strong. If you look at poverty rate among families, so if you look at poverty rates of families constructed by one person with dependent child or even two persons with dependent children, Germany has a staggeringly high poverty rate. You know, in the third quintile, which would be essentially a comfortable middle class, 22% of families with dependent children, if there is a one-member family, are in poverty in Germany today. And even at the fourth quintile, which you would call upper class, there is still a 5% incidence of poverty rate. So, look, these things really do have a role in the current shaping of the European Parliament, and they fit in the competitiveness question that you asked before. Because on the one hand, of course, we need to make sure the legislation is moving forward for the successful part of society. But on the other hand, there needs to be more focus on those that have less education and also those with children because they just have less time to work.
Right, you brought up a very interesting correlation between the family poverty rate and the rise of some of these more right-wing parties, especially like AfD in Germany. And I was just wondering if the same could be applied for other countries. For example, we did not see a very big political earthquake here in Poland. Does that have to do with the relative economic stability seen in this country?
Yes. So my remark on Germany are also based on our proprietary surveys. So indeed, for Germany, that was a critical element. And the question about the high incidence of poverty among family with children is a recurrent theme that tends to support right-wing parties. And as you correctly said, in Poland, because the situation has been actually very well managed over the years, it's kind of keeping some form of center more than in other places. I mean, it's not the only dimension. For example, in France, the situation is not so much linked to poverty around children, but is more linked to the fact that there is growing competition on wages and downward pressure on living standards of very small entrepreneurs and people with low-skilled jobs, as well as lower public resources on education, which people perceive to be a hindrance on their capacity of building a good life. So in the case of France, the question is the state is perceived to be becoming almost an enemy of those that need the most opportunities.
Right. Thank you so much, Madam, for joining us and bringing to the table your insights.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.